So moved. All right. Bear with us a few minutes, and we will start our regular meeting. Good evening. I'd like to go ahead and call to order our regular meeting, Monday, November 7th, and the night of a full moon, a week of a full moon, so there's that. So I'd like to have the invocation led by Bowers. See, the full moon's already started. Councilwoman Bauer, and then the Pledge of Allegiance led by Councilwoman Bowers, and then we'll have roll call.
Let us pray silently together, each one of us, according to our individual beliefs. Let us offer thanks for our blessings and for one another. Let us be a source of hope for those in need and contentment for those who are lonely. Let us give gratitude for this opportunity to serve the city of Gahanna. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Jeremy, please call the roll.
Angelou.
Here.
Bauer. Greger.
Here.
Padova.
Here.
Renner.
Here.
Schnetzer. Here. Weaver.
Keeping you. All right, thank you. Item B, additions or corrections to the agenda. Are there any? All right, seeing none. Hearing of visitors. Jeremy, do I have any speaker slips?
None this evening.
Wonderful. We're moving right along. All right, item D, presentations. We do have a presentation from Casco on a revised agreement for the Crescent.
Yes, good evening, Council President Renner, members of council. Nate Strum with the City of Development's Department. With me this evening, I have Larry Canini, representing Canini Associate, and Brent, I always mess up your last name, Brent. Dobchek from Casco Communities to talk through a little bit about what has changed in the development agreement. As a refresher, this agreement came forward about 2 weeks ago now, maybe a little bit even longer, prior to the Halloween holiday. At the Committee of the Whole, it was asked to bring back with some revisions tied to the development, specifically around the payments, the CIB debt service payments proposed, the developer incurred costs tied to the infrastructure. As a refresher, when the Crescent project was first presented to this body many full moons ago, There was a discussion around I think it was a $1.2-ish million debt service payment tied to the infrastructure. This is a significant increase. This is $4.4 million total debt service for a new road infrastructure project tied to the project. I'll let the development team speak through about what those changes are necessitated, as well as what the summary of the changes are in this document. There was a question previously, I think it was by you, Mr. Snetzer, around the values and what happens if a certain office user or a different type of user doesn't come in. So I think some of that has been addressed in the scale nature of the reimbursement process, but I'll let them certainly speak to those values. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to these fine gentlemen over here.
Can everybody hear us?
Good evening. Larry Canini and Associates and Brent Sobchak with Castro Communities. I know we've reviewed this on a couple of occasions, and we understand there's been some questions and comments from council, and our team has kind of reconvened over the last few weeks, and we have provided, which I think is all in your packets, kind of a new structure to kind of offset what we initially had asked for based on our performance, because there were obviously concerns about the commitments we would make, as well as commitments from users that we are currently working with. So I'll let Brent kind of review that. He has the cheat sheet for me on that, so I'll let him handle that.
Good evening, everyone. Just kind of the summary of the previous document to the proposed. The majority of the red line changes kind of relate to really name changes in the whereas sections, where you're going from Crescent to Casto. But more of the business term changes, the first starting with total cost of the public infrastructure went from 3.4 to 4.4 million. The reimbursement was 1.4 million, and now it's a proposed tiered structure. And within that, there's a couple layers. So the previous option did not have a SIB loan request. This has a $2 million SIB loan request. Then the reimbursement of over and above the SIB loan would be tied to income tax associated with the development. So anything less than $350,000, the reimbursement would be $400,000 over and above the SIB loan. Between $350,000 and $500,000, the reimbursement would be $1.4 million over the SIB loan, and anything in excess of $500,000 would be full reimbursement of the total cost. So I think that, at least in our mind, was to address the concern if the proposed user does not come to the site, the full reimbursement request would kind of be tied to that performance. The other big change from the previous version to this version, the old version required the existing landowner to donate the parkland as a condition of the TIF. We are operating that donation should be occurring here in the next week or two, and it will have occurred, so that language has been struck from this version. Those would be the main kind of major changes associated with the old version to the proposed.
We can pull up any of those documents up on the screen if anyone needs to review that, both at home as well as there's other questions I know that were brought up about the floodplain that I think I had sent around a note through Jeremy earlier today from the Casto team at Burgess and Nyepel to kind of address some of those concerns. There was also some questions around the generation of TIF and income tax that I included as part of an updated ROI that was also transmitted back out this way. So happy to review any of that information.
Are there any questions? Mr. Snetzer?
Thank you, Mr. President. So I just want to make sure, since obviously this is a regular meeting, not a committee meeting, just want to make sure that we're looking at, when we go back and do our homework, we're looking at the right documents. So we were provided a red line copy at our last committee discussion. I believe we have a revision of a revision, is that correct? So that's the terms that you had just mentioned, that is in this document titled Summary of Development Agreement Econ Terms 11-22.
And it should be the version 3 is the document in question for the red line as well as the clean copy, Councilman.
And if I could add, I forgot one other piece. I think there was a concern if the SIB loan was directly with the city and the project didn't move forward, and who would be responsible for the debt service. So we're proposing funding a interest reserve account held with the city at 1.25 times annual debt service to offset that. So this is a revision to the last document you saw.
Okay, that's cool. I just want to make sure we're looking at the appropriate document when you reference these newer details. So thank you, Mr. President.
Yes, Ms. Bowers? Oh, you don't?
Yeah, no.
Okay, sorry.
Thank you for coming back with this. I do appreciate it. Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay. Thank you very much. Consent agenda. We do have a consent agenda that, as published, there is an ordinance that has not been read in front of council. I'm going to read it, and then I'll ask everybody for a motion to pass the consent agenda. The ordinance is 64-2022, an ordinance amending Ordinance 54-2022 to establish and appropriate funds as required for grant and loan agreements associated with the infrastructure, construction, and loan agreements for Science One LLC, extension of Tech Center Drive, waiving second reading, and declare an emergency. Do I have a motion to pass the consent agenda as published?
So moved.
Have a first by Mr. Snetzer. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Ms. Powers. Any discussion? Seeing none. Jeremy, please call the roll.
Schnetzer?
Yes.
Bowers?
Yes.
McGregor?
Yes.
Padova?
Yes.
Renner?
Yes.
Weaver?
Yes.
Angelou?
Yes.
Excellent. Consent agenda is passed. Item F, motions. We do have one motion for consideration tonight, MT 0018-2022. Motion to appoint somebody to the local board of tax review, seat 2, for the unexpired term ending December 31st, 2023. Do I have any nominations?
Yes, Mr. President.
Ms. Powers?
I'd like to move to appoint Tricia Sprankle to the local board of tax review, seat 2, for the unexpired term ending December 31st, 2023.
Thank you. I have a first for Ms. Sprinkle. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Weaver. Any discussion? Okay, Jeremy, please call the roll, and we'll appoint Ms. Sprinkle to the local board of tax review.
Bowers?
Yes.
Weaver?
Yes.
McGregor?
Yes.
Padova?
Yes.
Renner?
Yes.
Schnetzer?
Yes.
Angelou?
Yes.
Wonderful. Thank you. Jeremy, you'll let her know? Thank you.
Yes.
All right, item G, ordinances for introduction and first reading. I'm just going to read through these for introduction. 62-2022, an ordinance to authorize the mayor to enter into a revised development agreement related to the project known as the Crescent at Central Park to support related infrastructure needs of the project and expanded uses within the development site. 65-2022, an ordinance authorizing supplemental appropriations damage to city property. Ordinance 66-2022, an ordinance authorizing supplemental appropriations water meter fees. And ordinance 67-2022, an ordinance authorizing the mayor to enter into contract with American Structure Point, Inc. for professional services related to the Wine Ridge Court Bridge replacement, PID 116417. Okay, item H, correspondence and actions. Mr. Clerk, do you have anything for us?
We do have one item this evening. It is a Ohio Division of Liquor Control notice that I've sent to council. This is for a new permit for Traditions at Gahanna, doing business as Walnut Trace, 389 Old Ridenhour Road, Gahanna, Ohio. There are no objections from the Division of Police, so unless council has any objections, we will note that we don't request a hearing.
Okay, well, under correspondence and actions, council colleagues, do you have any objections? And do you have anything, does anybody have anything to add for the good of the board? Okay, we are moving right along. Item I, representatives, Community Improvement Corporation. I don't have a report this evening. I apologize. I will type up a report and send that out and then announce it next meeting. Mayor, when is our next meeting for CIC?
CSC's next meeting is 2 weeks from tomorrow.
The 15th?
15th or one,
Okay.
yes, 1 week from tomorrow. That's what I
Tuesday,
said.
November 15th. Thank you, Mr. Weaver. And it'll be at 7:30 or 8 o'clock.
8 o'clock.
8 o'clock in the community rooms. Thank
Correct.
you. Mid-Ohio Regional Planning Commission, MORPC, Ms. Angelou.
The next commission meeting is this Wednesday, which is very different because we're always on Thursday, but it's Wednesday because Thursday will be the Veterans Parade downtown, so we are going to be 1 day earlier than that. That's all I have.
Thank you. And Mr. Weaver, there's a committee that, on MORPC that you said, I think you have something to report?
Thank you, Mr. President. Yes, the Regional Policy Roundtable will be meeting also on November 15th, Tuesday. As part of that roundtable, the Public Policy Agenda Working Group met on November 4th and has finalized our proposal to the full Regional Policy Roundtable, which will take action to recommend the agenda to the Executive Committee for action in December. Once again, the agenda is focusing on regionalism, transportation, sustainability, data and digital infrastructure, as well as racial and social justice. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. Convention and Visitors Bureau, Ms. Padova.
Thank you. I have quite a bit with the holidays around the corner here. Visit Gahanna just released a new Creekside District brochure that showcases the area as a destination for dining, shopping, outdoor recreation, and entertainment. It also highlights Cora. This is currently being distributed at local hotels to help bring guests to Creekside, and it'll also be expanded further in the future. The fall and winter herbal cocktail trail passports were recently released. Each time a new passport is released, there are about 500 people who pick them up. And typically about 100 of those will complete and turn in their passports for a prize. I also just learned that about half of those, or more than half, are actually from outside of Gahanna, which I was a little bit surprised to hear. Such a large percent of those were from outside of Gahanna. The Creekside Pumpkin Crawl was very well attended. It was a big success. They had balloon artists, face paintings, amongst other events with the pumpkins as well. The Holiday Lights Celebration and annual tree lighting is Sunday, November 20th from 3 to 6:30. And Visit Gahanna is seeking more volunteers to help with that event. Visit Gahanna is also presenting the Santa race on Saturday, December 3rd. So spots are limited, so register soon before that sells out. Volunteers are also needed for this event to help with registration, water stations, and refuel station. So you can sign up for Holiday Lights and or the Santa race by clicking the link on the Visit Gahanna website. The Ohio Herb Center is hosting in-person Santa visits this year on Saturday, December 10th from 10 to 2. Visits are free, but they will be accepting donations for Grin, and they are encouraged. In an effort to keep everyone safe, you need to register on the Herb Center's website to reserve a time spot, and spots are limited, so definitely get those reserved here soon. That's all.
Thank you very much. School Board, Ms. Powers.
Yes, thank you. Just briefly, on Wednesday, November the 9th at 6:30, Superintendent Tracy Deagle is hosting Coffee with the Superintendent at Panera Bread, catty corner from the high school at the corner of North Hamilton and Granville. The next regular school board meeting will be the third Thursday of the month. So this month it'll fall on the 17th at 6:30. Those meetings are in person at Clark Hall or streamed on YouTube. That's it. Thank you.
Excellent, thank you. Item J, official reports. Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. President. I do have a few items, so bear with me. I will go as quickly as possible. An update on our facilities project. Last week, the city issued $8.5 million of short-term capital facility notes related to the 825 Tech Center Drive project. Proceeds from the sale of those notes will be used for the building purchase, which is expected to close next week. So, next week. In the meantime, the next phase of the project is moving forward as we have engaged Michael Schuster Associates to begin the architectural and engineering work. That was a contract that council approved just a few weeks ago. And I know Mr. Schultz has already had preliminary meetings with them and will be starting to, I believe we're going to begin regular meetings with an internal team as well to kind of outline what that process will look like. So that is moving forward. We also are in the process of selecting a construction manager who will work in conjunction with the design team. RFQs were issued and responses were received. Those responses are now being evaluated. Interviews will be scheduled actually within the next few weeks. The hope is to have somebody engaged and on board by the end of the year to begin working with the design team. Veterans Day, this Friday, the City Hall will be closed in observance of Veterans Day. The Gahanna Veterans Memorial Committee will be hosting the annual Veterans Day ceremony over at VFW Park, along with the brick dedication ceremony that happens. That event is at 11 a.m. on Friday, again at Veterans Memorial Park over on Johnstown Road. Since we were last together, for comment at least, our city celebrated two groundbreaking events. The first was at the Crescent at Central Park. It was for a 45,000 plus square foot medical office building that will house 5 medical providers, including a primary care practice, vascular surgical center, a cardiovascular practice, podiatry practice, and an ophthalmology practice, bringing high quality medical services as well as jobs to our city. And also a fourth building that was approved by Planning Commission that will go on Lot 1, directly across the street from Walnut Creek Medical Offices. That will house Ohio Gastro, which will be consolidating 2 of their office buildings and expanding their services at that facility. That will bring 4 buildings coming to the Crescent, 4 medical buildings coming to the Crescent at Central Park since 2020. And then also on the same day that we held the groundbreaking, obviously the high school, our Gahanna Jefferson Public School partners celebrated the official groundbreaking ceremony for the new high school. It was very cold, but it was a fantastic and inspirational day. I think the kids were just excited as all as the adults were, so that was a wonderful event to attend. On Friday, November 18th, and I apologize, Mr. President, when you asked me the date of the CIC meeting because I had this date in my head of Friday, November 18th, the City of Gahanna, along with the Gahanna Community Improvement Corporation, will be partnering with Columbus Business First to hold a networking breakfast. That will be held at the Peak at Edison. The event is free to attend, but registration is required. There is a link, hopefully you all received the city newsletter. There's a link to register contained within the newsletter, and we'll also be posting that online as well. Again, the event is free, but registration is required. We have been working, as I've shared before, on the city's first ever sustainability plan. We applied for and received a grant from MORPSI, which partnered us with a group of students at The Ohio State University. We held a workshop with them where they presented their initial recommendations and findings to get our input and feedback. Councilwoman Angelo, thank you for being part of that. And Councilman Renner, I know you were sick that day and weren't able to make it, but they were a very inspirational group of students who had fantastic ideas. They have issued a survey. They're asking for the community's help. We have posted that. It's also in the newsletter. It's been posted on our social media page, also online. We're asking, again, the community to participate in that survey and provide that class with some feedback, which they will then finalize their plan, and we will schedule a workshop with council. Doesn't necessarily need to be at a council meeting, but just a workshop where they will present their findings to you as well in an informal setting. Parks and Recreation held its new version of the Great Gahanna Goblin Fest at Academy Park. You might remember that event started back in COVID. It was a drive-through event at Academy Park. This year it transitioned into an in-person walk-around event. So thanks to the many vendors and sponsors who participated in the event, and to all the little ghosts and goblins who were well attired that evening. It was freezing, but they were all there. And of course, to our fabulous Parks and Recs department, their creativity is just always over the top with what they're able to come up with to create a family-friendly, fun event. That's a tough one. Two more things quickly. Over the last few weeks, I've had the honor of attending 4 Courts of Honor for Gahanna students who achieved the rank of Eagle Scout, which is the highest honor that can be achieved in scouting. Only 2% of eligible scouts ever earn that rank, and of the 4, 3 were young women. So they were the first female in Gahanna to earn the rank of Eagle Scout, which was pretty impressive. But all 4 of the Eagle Scouts were very impressive with their dedication and the commitment to the projects that they completed. They were Michaela Barb Cox, Ann Wilson, Ray Razinga, and the most recent was Delaney Ray yesterday. So we are in good hands with tomorrow's youth and tomorrow's leaders. And finally, Gahanna Lincoln High School football team won again in the playoffs. We'd actually like to thank the City of Whitehall and Whitehall Schools. They have opened their fields to Gahanna Lincoln High School to allow their games to be their home away from home over on their field. That now is over because now we have to play at a neutral site, but the fan support has been great. The team will be playing this Friday against Pickerington Central, whom we beat earlier this year. So we've got to show fan support and be there on Friday. They'll be playing at DeSale. So go Lions, and that is all I have. Thank you for your patience.
Thank you. Mr. City Attorney, welcome back.
Thank you. I'm glad to be back. Paris was so boring, but I have nothing further to add.
Paris is really not worth it, huh?
I asked him where his beret was today.
Only tourists wear berets. So
Well, thank you. All right, council comment, Ms. Angelou.
Well, we have to give those football players at Lincoln High School amazing things, because they only got to play 2, I think, on the home place, and yet they're doing so well. So this is pretty exciting, I think, for our community. I have nothing really to say except tomorrow is voting day, and hopefully everything will go smooth, and we will have changes, I'm sure, and it's an exciting time. That's all I have. Well, I should say something. Actually, the mayor on Saturday afternoon, I was in the morning, we're with Girl Scouts, and talking about voting. And it was just such a pleasure to do. I mean, it was, the children were just amazing, and when I asked how many are from Gahanna, there were actually some that were from Gahanna, because this was in Columbus that this is happening. But it was a wonderful opportunity, and just came home feeling so good about how these children, these girls, are really into doing things perfectly. So it's perfect. That's all I have.
Thank you. Mrs. McGregor?
Friday is Veterans Day, and they have the bricklaying. And this year, we have several family members that have bricks on both sides, mine and my husband's. But his, I think 2 or 3 times great-grandfather's brick, James Martin McGregor, will be placed. He was a Civil War soldier, and we found this out through, we had a trip to Gettysburg, and they gave us information. You can contact the National Archives. Several people have asked about that. You can contact the National Archives and ask for your family members' pension records, which really give more information than like military records. They have like their payroll and all that kind of stuff. And so we contacted them about James Martin McGregor and found out, they sent us probably 20 pages worth of information. And he lived at 93. He asked for his pension to be adjusted, And it was granted because he could no longer do a day's work and was stone deaf. And they adjusted his pension from $6 to $8 a month. And so it was pretty interesting to find out how things were back in the day. And so I think the gal from Parks called to make sure we had the dates right on it, because she said, I think this is the oldest veteran brick we have in the cemetery, because it's 1850 something, I think, or 1860, I think. So anyway, I hope you all can make it to the Veterans Celebration. It's always a nice ceremony.
Thank you. Mr. Weaver.
Thank you, Mr. President. Also attended the groundbreaking for the high school on the 20th. Very exciting and cold, but very exciting for the new students. As a proud alum myself of the high school, I look forward to the next chapter and visiting once the project is completed. Participated in a Ohio Municipal League training on the 27th, which focused on public-private partnership structures that are available to municipalities, and learned a lot, and helpful as we continue to look at proposed development agreements and any incentives. Want to thank our wonderful Parks and Rec staff. I had the pleasure of joining the campfire at Bryn Mawr Park in this evening with s'mores, and I believe I was told that it was the most popular of the park visits, so happy to be among the community there. Just a fun evening. I will be here hosting constituent hours in the front conference room on Wednesday from 5:30 to 7. In regards to Gahanna football, this is a tough one in my house. We are a house divided, as my wife is a Pickerington Central teacher. But I am a Gahanna guy through and through, so go Lions. And lastly, get out and vote. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. Ms. Padova.
Thank you. I feel like we are constantly thanking our Parks and Rec department for doing fabulous things here in this city. So I would also like to say once again, thank you to the Parks and Rec department, because the Great Goblin Trail was amazing. I had no idea what to expect. I had not been to that before. And it was everything. It was like all the little details were there. The pumpkin patch, the painting, the acrobats, everything was just really, really nice. It was a great evening. I went through when it was not dark yet, but I could tell that once it got dark, the lights were going to be very, very cool. So thank you guys so much. I was really glad to see that, and everybody that I talked to there was having a great time. I also attended one of the Ray Rosinga's Court of Honor with the mayor, and I had never been to that before either. And it was very cool to see just everything that he had done throughout his life to make it to that point. So congratulations, Ray, on that. And just to echo my colleagues, go vote tomorrow.
Thank you. Mr. Snetzer.
Yeah, it's always tough, again, being kind of towards the tail end of the roundtable here, but just want to echo a lot of the sentiments that were previously stated. Go Lions. Obviously, we have Veterans Day on Friday. My grandfather, a proud Navy man, still alive and kicking and living independently, but is fastly approaching triple digits. Just a couple of months ago, I was having a conversation with him about his military service, and he was telling me a story about his uncle that I had heard a lot of these stories before, and then he tells me a story about another uncle who, up until that time, I had not heard of, who served on the USS Franklin, which, according to Wikipedia here, was the most heavily damaged U.S. aircraft carrier to survive World War II. It was hit by a handful of kamikazes and limped its way back to the state of Washington after the Battle of Okinawa. And it is really, so I went and found some grainy footage on YouTube about kamikazes, and I can only imagine being 18 or 20 years old on one of these ships and seeing an airplane fly into, right into, one of your crewmen, and how harrowing that really must have been. And so when we kind of take a step back and we reflect on Veterans Day, just keep in mind that, we live in, the greatest country in the history of the world, in my opinion, and we have a lot of brave soldiers to really thank for that. So that's it for me.
Thank you. Ms. Bowers?
Thank you. Just briefly, I'll start off by reminding everyone to make sure to get out and vote tomorrow. All the way down, especially paying attention to our judicial candidates. Oftentimes, people forget to vote or forget to look up information about judicial candidates, so I would just encourage everyone to take a look at those important races, because those are also local elected offices and make a huge impact on our community and our day-to-day lives. I wanted to thank very quickly, too, Gahanna Division of Police and Mifflin Township Fire for being out in the community on at Trick or Treat on last Monday. We got photographs with both a police cruiser and one of the officers that was out and about, and also my son was very excited to see the tiller truck up at the top of the hill at Adamson and Skinner in Rathburn Woods, so that was pretty exciting, too. And of course, they were passing out lots of candy. So thank you to first responders for your work. Unfortunately, the next morning, we had a number of squads in our cul-de-sac, and we just appreciate the professionalism and the work that our first responders do every day in responding to emergencies in our community. Just switching gears really quickly, I have forwarded out to my colleagues and the mayor and city attorney my constituent reports for August and September, summarizing all the wonderful activities that we did in those months, and also identifying the constituent contact that I received over those months. I would appreciate if the clerk would incorporate those into the minutes on my behalf, so I don't have to repeat myself about all the things that we did, or all the people that we spoke to, and the issues that matter to our constituents. So, thank you.
Thank you. I just have a couple of comments. November 20th, on Thursday, I was invited again by Royal Manor staff to present and talk to third graders about citizenship and our responsibility to be citizens as an American. And one of the things, and it's easy for me, it's one of the most favorite subjects I like to talk about, because there's a very beautiful document called the United States Constitution. And the preamble to that Constitution actually defines for all of us what our values and virtues as Americans. And so we begin with that. And it's fun to actually project on the screen and to showcase and remember what the preamble is. And all those words that are in capital letters, those are the values. So we the people, more perfect union, domestic tranquility, common defense, and promote the general welfare. And we can actually probably debate some of the merits of these, but these are the virtues of being an American. And then I sign off at the end with the 3 V's to voice, to always make sure that you participate and engage. So make sure that people hear your voice. Volunteer. Community service is actually probably one of the bedrocks of a good democracy, a good, strong democracy. And then number 3, of course, my colleagues have already talked about, go vote. For the love of everything sacred in the universe, please go vote. And don't forget that tomorrow is that very special day. Also, tomorrow in the very wee hours in the morning, we talk about going outside and getting back to nature, but sometimes we forget about nighttime. There are things that Mother Nature likes to give us, and you're going to have one heck of a show. It's part of the full moon. There's a lunar eclipse. The skies are supposed to be clear, so please go see this. It's called the blood moon for obvious reasons, because it's going to be blood red. And it's supposed to be spectacular. That's all I have for tonight. Is there a motion to adjourn? So moved. All right, we'll get ready for Finance Committee.
On your signal, sir? Good to go? All right. So let's kick off Finance Committee for November 7th, 2022. We just have one discussion item on the agenda for this evening. This is the presentation of the fiscal year 2023 budget. With that, I'll turn it over to the administration. I don't know if Mayor Jadwin, you have any words before we put Joanne on the spot?
Only that I would like to thank Director Burry for all of her work these past several months and all of our directors. We have had multiple meetings throughout the course of the last 2 months, but the budget process actually begins in June. And I don't know that people realize that. And I always feel like we just finished this and now we're starting it again. But we don't take what we're about to propose to you tonight, the decisions and the requests that are being made, we did not make those lightly. They've been evaluated and vetted multiple times. And actually, I'm just going to turn it over to Director Burry and let her walk through the presentation with you. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And with that, Joanne, you have the floor. And do you intend to use the overhead up here?
I do.
All right. Kevin, well, I guess to my council colleagues, is anybody else able to access that?
I've had difficulty recently with that.
Yeah, me too. Kevin, is that an easy fix? No. We're referring to I think it's the Biamp Modena app or whatever it is, and yeah, mine says no rooms found. So.
We'll let her start.
Okay.
Unplug it back.
All right.
How about the chambers?
You're going that four-digit number up there? 258.
This is what I get.
You're not on the right network.
I can certainly follow along up there if necessary. Okay. We'll fix it later. Ms. Bowers, is yours working?
Yes, I'm good, thank you.
Joanne, feel free to proceed.
Yeah, for some reason it's not having trouble connecting. There we go. All right. All right, so we are going to talk about the 2023 budget. Great way to end a beautiful day, right? Hopefully everybody got outside and got to enjoy some of that great weather today. So our agenda for today, we're going to talk about the factors that influence the 2023 budget. We're going to discuss the general fund request, what impact that has on general fund balance. We'll look at a 5-year view for the general fund, and then we'll move on to the requests for the public safety, parks and recreation, and public service funds. Those are the operational funds that receive 25% of the income tax. We'll move on to the capital request, which receives 75% of the income tax. We'll talk about some upcoming initiatives that will be occurring in 2023 that will impact future budgets, and then talk about the next steps for the 2023 budget. So talking about the main factors that influence the 2023 budget, of course, we have the historically high inflation and energy costs. The Federal Reserve has been passing policy like crazy, increasing those interest rates, trying to slow that inflation, but it is having an impact on the 2023 budget. The largest impact is for our fleet services and those parts and materials that are needed to keep our fleet maintained. Another big impact is utilities across the board, including the fuel costs for our fleet. We have the development of the citywide capital improvement plan. So 2023 kind of being this transition year from the capital needs assessment to that capital improvement plan. It will incorporate various plans across the city. Organizational changes. So as part of the budget process every year, we meet with departments, talk about how they're organized, what staffing vacancies they have, maybe some new positions that they may need. So there's some organizational changes that you'll see in the budget book. Then, of course, the local economy. So there are discussions about recession, but I don't think that's going to slow our economic growth much. We have the mega project in Tail just north of us. I think that's going to keep that economic growth kind of going. It may slow slightly from beginning of project to end, but I don't see that slowing down the economic growth that we're currently in. And then we have the labor force. So we continue to see low unemployment and more job openings than there are eligible employees to fill them. So to address that, the one thing that we looked at is how can we be more competitive as we were negotiating contracts, looking at the amendments to the unclassified compensation program, making sure that we could attract and retain that human capital. So starting with the general fund and looking at our revenue, of course, 72% is income tax, still our largest source of revenue for the general fund, followed by real estate taxes and then interest and investment income. Looking at what we're expecting for 2023 is a 9% increase compared to the 2022 budget. Majority of that is going to be the income tax, as discussed. We're in an economic growth right now. And then this is followed by investment income. So with the changes to the interest rates, and we were able to keep our investment portfolio short duration during the low interest rate environment, 2 years or less. So now we're going to have the ability to take care of that, or take advantage of that rising interest rate. So projecting a $1.2 million increase to our investment income. I want to go back and talk a little bit about the income tax increase. So you're going to see throughout the book that it's discussing a 3% increase, and then you're going to see larger increases as we go through here, looking at that compared to 2022. And it's all kind of based on the way in which we project income tax. So if you think about moving into the 2022 budget, we planned for zero growth on income tax. We knew we had some anomalies with 2021 with net profits. That probably wasn't going to be sustainable moving into 2022. And we also knew that we were experiencing some economic growth, but we weren't quite sure at that point, was the economic growth going to offset what we were going to expect to see on the drop with net profit. So as we move through the third quarter of 2022, we're actually seeing a 4% increase, actual realization. So we use that actual data through the third quarter of 2022 to project our 2023. But since we're not planning on using those additional resources, there was no reason to go back and amend our projection for 2022. So when you're looking in the book and you're seeing that 3% increase, you're going to see a larger increase compared to the budget because we're using actual experience to project that 2023 income tax into the future. Moving on to expenditures. As a service organization, our largest expenditures are salaries and benefits and contract services. Make sense? Looking at what we could expect in the general fund compared to 22, we're planning a 10% increase. The majority of this is related to the unclassified compensation program and the union pay increases that have already been negotiated, and then we have one final contract to negotiate, and we were projecting an increase for that one also. We also have some organizational structure changes and some new positions. So page 10 of the budget book kind of lays out that new organizational structure. And then page 33, that's under the all fund summary. There's a subheader called salaries and benefits. That kind of gives an outline of those changes, the new positions that are being requested. So when looking for that information, I would refer to page 10 and page 33 of your budget book. The second largest increase that's being planned for the general fund is in materials and supplies, again, purely driven by inflation and high energy costs, including those fuel purchases for our fleet as well as parts and materials. So what impact is all of this going to have on the general fund balance? So we're planning revenue of about $29.7 million. We're planning expenditures to be about $30.1 million, a use of about $413,000 or 1.86% of fund balance. So kind of moving to the right of the page is how does that align with our fund balance policy? So the top section is how we're calculating the emergency reserve in accordance with that policy, looking at our total appropriations of about $30.1 million, backing out our debt service appropriations to come up with our operating appropriations of $29.6 million. 25% of that is a little bit north of $7.4 million. So setting aside $7.45 million for our emergency reserve. Looking to the middle, where does that leave us, or projected to leave us as far as unreserved and unassigned fund balance? We have $21.7 million, and that includes the planned use of $413,000. Backing out the emergency reserve leaves us about $14.3 million of unreserved, unassigned fund balance. How many months of operations does that look like? Taking the $29.6 million from the top here of our operating appropriations, simple math, dividing that by 12 for 1 month, times 2 gives us $4.9 million. So we have an excess of $9.3 million above the 2 months of unreserved fund balance required by policy. And then kind of focusing on just that $14.3 million number, that's equivalent to approximately 6 months of operations, so about 3 times what's required by policy. So that's our summary of the general fund. Well, nope, not yet. So we're going to talk about the 5-year impact, but wanted to step back for a minute and look at the last full 5 years and kind of what's happened with general fund balance. So in 2017, we started with about $24.7 million. We had planned on using $1.7. Below the black line is actual results. We actually ended up using $857,000, leaving us with $23.8 million. So we used 3% and we used $845,000 less than what we were projecting. Moving into 2018, so this was before issue 12, before we had a dedicated source for capital. So this is kind of that last use of fund balance from the general fund for capital purposes. So we had started the year with about $23.8 million, planned to use 5.8, used 5.1 million, or 21%, still using less than we anticipated. Moving across to 2019, this was the year of the income tax lawsuit settlement. So we were actually planning on returning money until that settlement came through. The use of fund balance was already planned. If you all recall, we had about $4.1 million sitting in a general fund reserve for the litigation, and then we issued the $5 million in bonds to pay the $9.1 million lawsuit. So we ended up using about $1.6 million. Had the lawsuit not occurred, though, we would have returned about $2.4 million. So we used about 9% of fund balance that year. Then we come into 2020 with the pandemic. Ran various models. I don't know if you all remember the V model and the W model and all those forecasting that we did to try to determine what we could actually expect from the pandemic. We ended up coming back, reducing our planned revenue, and in turn requesting that council reduce our appropriations until we could figure out what all of it meant. So we had planned on returning a little bit more than $1 million and ended up returning about $3.1 million, so returned about 18% of fund balance back. As we moved into 2021, still a lot of uncertainties, right? We weren't sure what the pandemic was going to cause as we moved through the future. Still kept on working on all those forecasts. There was a lot of information out that said recovery wouldn't be until 2023. So still plan to lose revenue in 2021. So at that point, we had requested to use about $1.5 million. But we all know how 2021 ended up. We ended up rebounding on income tax quicker than we thought. Again, it was all kind of net profit driven. So we knew that we'd had some still uncertainties moving into 2022. So in that particular year, we returned a little over $4 million to general fund balance, or 20%. So kind of over that 5-year period, we started with 24.7 million, and we ended up pretty much almost where we began, at 24.2 million. So now looking into the future, what does the 5-year forecast look like for the general fund? This is a pretty good picture, right? We're not in the business to make money. We are in the business to return taxpayer dollars in the form of services. So this being right about where we are expenditure-wise is showing that we're setting our levies at a responsible amount, our charges for services. We're doing what we're supposed to do. We're returning those taxpayer dollars in the form of those services. Now that concludes the general fund summary. So now we'll move on to the special revenue funds. We're going to start with public safety. On the
Joanne.
revenue side,
Just real quick.
Yeah.
Since it is a discussion item, I hate to break up your rhythm here.
Yep.
Just want to maybe take a pause and see if there's just any questions from council. I know that was quite a bit of information. If there was anything there that maybe could use a little bit more clarification, thought it might be appropriate to see if anybody up here at the podium. Anything from council regarding the general fund? Okay, thank you.
you're welcome. So looking at the public safety fund, expecting an 8% increase in revenue, mainly driven by income tax. Again, you'll see 3% in your book, but again, it looks a little bit higher when compared to the budget. We did not adjust the 2022 budget. And then there's also going to be an increase in charges for services. So this is associated with the School Resource Officers Program. So it's purely driven by actual wages and benefits. So since there was an increase to police officers' salaries, there will also be an increase to the charges that we're charging the schools for the School Resource Officer Program. We also have an opportunity to possibly provide some additional services where we could charge for additional services. And you'll see that as we kind of go through the new request for positions that are within the budget book. On the expenditure side, expecting about a 17% increase. A majority of that is coming from salaries and benefits. Again, the union contract called for increased wages, so that's where we're expecting a lot of the increase. And then we also have some new positions. So again, referring to page 33, anything that's not funded by the general fund within that summary has the name of the fund next to it. So you'll be able to see what's actually being requested from these special funds. We're also expecting an increase in transfers out. This is to offset the police pension. We do have a property tax that covers a portion of police pension, but it's all inside millage, so it doesn't cover the full amount. So this is a transfer that's needed to cover the remainder of the police pension that the property taxes don't cover. So again, it's a percentage of wages. So since their wages are going up, pension expense is going up, the transfer needs to go up. As we move on to the Parks and Recreation Fund, expecting a 21% increase there. A lot of their increase is related to charges for services. So they're expecting an increase across all programs for charges for services, but looking at camps, that had the largest increases. They believe there's some capacity for additional programming, which will bring in additional revenue. Next is followed by the income tax projection for an increase, seeing a little bit of a higher percentage there, as we had already discussed, plus the percentage being allocated to Parks and Rec is a little bit higher for 2023 compared to 2022. On the expenditure side, expecting a 26% increase, all salaries and benefits driven for the most part. Again, looking at that approved unclassified compensation program increase. We have some reclassifications of some positions. And then also looking at the seasonal wages and workforce. So it's been a problem over the last few years getting those seasonal positions fully staffed. So hoping with some increase in rates that will be able to attract some additional seasonal employees. So this is a combination of a hopeful increase in workforce along with those increase in rates. As we move on to the Public Service Fund, I'm expecting a 23% increase, again, related to income tax. And also, there's a slight increase in the allocation going to the Public Service Fund. On the expenditure side, expecting about a 31% increase. In this case, the majority of that increase is coming from contract services. So there's a couple things that are driving that. One is a request for expenditures to enhance the street rating program. We touched on that briefly when we went over the capital improvement plan when we had that presentation. The next is a stormwater analysis that's planned. In addition, as that department becomes staffed, as we're bringing new people on, there's an expectation that we'll need additional engineering services from third parties as that staffing plays out.
And so Joanne, just as we kind of paused with the move from the general fund to the special service funds, I wonder if maybe we don't pause here just to see if there's any questions regarding the special revenue funds before presumably diving into the capital improvement fund. Right. Anything from council on the special revenue funds, the parks, public safety, and public service? No? Okay. Thank you.
So looking at the capital request and talking through how that was developed, as we all know, we're working on developing the city's first capital improvement plan. So 2023 kind of transitioning from that capital needs assessment to the capital improvement plan. As part of that, we took a step back and kind of analyzed what projects do we currently have outstanding, what stage are they in, and how long to completion. And then looked at what do we actually have capacity to do for 2023 based on staffing levels and knowing what we have to finish as far as projects that are still outstanding in 2022. So just as a kind of a reminder, we'll go through with on the number side what we're actually pulling forward through the remainder of 2022 and into 2023. So we are planning on completing the capital improvement plan by the first quarter of 2023 and bringing it to council for adoption. In future budget years, the capital improvement plan's first year will serve as the following year's capital budget request. There'll be processes to have it reviewed and amended periodically, and then council would at least annually adopt that as part of the budget process to set the next year's capital budget request.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah, Ms. Angela.
Yeah, I found something about a capital improvement fund, and I think I gave it to Mayor Jadwin. It was 2017. Is this going to be very different from that because it was the same capital improvement fund? So it's not actually, this doesn't make it the first one, or what did that one?
So the capital needs assessment really wasn't a plan. It was an inventory of everything that was outstanding that we knew we had to do capital-wise. A big portion of that was that we lacked the funding for capital. So it was more of an assessment of everything that needed to be done throughout the city. With the capital improvement plan, it'll go a step further. So it'll outline what are all those projects and then actually attaching the resources to it. Those projects were also not properly staged in the capital needs assessment. So this will provide for proper staging of design through construction to completion. So it'll have a lot more information and actually have that tie-in of the resources and properly phase those projects over the appropriate amount of time.
Thank you.
So looking at revenue for the capital improvement plan, or capital improvement fund, largest is the income tax, and that's where we're expecting the largest part of the increase. Again, you'll see 3% in your book. It's a little bit higher compared to what was originally planned for 2022 based on what we're experiencing through the end of the third quarter. On the expenditure side, expecting a 56% reduction for almost $6.5 million. is the request. However, there's going to be about 19 million of projects that need to be completed through the remainder of 2022 and into 2023. So we're actually looking through 2023 of about 23 million worth of projects, 25 million worth of projects. So what do we have planned for 2023? We have the street rebuild and asphalt overlay for 4.1 million, park and trail asphalt overlay for 225,000, sidewalk maintenance 250,000. We have the fiber growth and redundancy for 400,000, continued design work on Big Walnut Trail Section 8 for 175,000, potential for land acquisition 200,000. Then we have the Price Roadhouse renovation of 98,000. And just want to go back on the revenue side here. So this intergovernmental revenue for 98,000, so that's a grant offset for that Price Roadhouse renovation. We have pool and park maintenance of about 465,000, and then equipment replacement, which is our PD vehicles, general fleet, and then we also have police radio, and then just general service and parks type equipment. So that concludes the capital improvement. If you guys have any questions on the capital side?
Yeah, just one from me real quick. The bullet pointed items there at the bottom, how many, if any, of those were already appropriated, or is everything there new?
So there was Section 8 money that was appropriated in 2022, so this is a continuation of that design work there. And then the Price Roadhouse, there was some additional funding that was planned. I believe it was 2021 and 2022, so this is following up on additions to that to get that completed.
Okay.
And then everything else is pretty much continued maintenance programs that we're continuing.
Mr. Weaver?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Director, what can you share what the land acquisition, potential land acquisition is?
So anytime that we're looking, it could be for multiple reasons. It could be that we've identified parcels to continue our facility plan. It could be that we have an opportunity to take advantage of some land for development. So it's just having kind of a placemaker within the budget in case those land purchases should arise and we could take advantage of them with the funds already appropriated.
There's nothing specific at this point. Got it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Ms. Bowers?
Yes, thank you. First, let me say I'm excited to see this allocation generally. Just a quick question. Could you talk a little bit more about the pool maintenance specifically? If you know what those maintenance expenditures are planned?
No, but we'd be happy to answer that at the next committee. I think Stephanie's in the office, or in the audience, so she's probably writing that down. So we will come back and kind of let you know what's planned for that for 2023.
Fantastic. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Anything further from council with regard to the capital improvement fund or the budget presentation in general? Okay, thank you, Joanne.
We still have a little more to wrap
You do?
up.
All right.
Not yet, not so fast. So 2023 initiatives that we will be undertaking that will impact future budgets. So we do have the strategic plan that's still being worked through. We have the capital improvement plan. So this will include the strategic plan, the facilities plan, land use plan, economic development plan, parks master plan. So kind of pooling all that together and coming up with a way to responsibly initiate some of those actions from those. We have facilities programming. This is a little bit different than the facilities capital plan. So the facilities capital plan is actually acquiring those facilities or acquiring the land to build. We also have to have a plan to operate them. So this particular item is looking at, once we acquire something, how are we going to operate it in the most responsible and cost-effective manner? We have the safety and risk program that's going to be coming in 2023, and then continued evaluation of the Creekside area. So those are kind of the high priority initiatives that will be undergoing in 2023 that you'll see impacting those future budget requests. So next steps for the 2023 budget, public comment. So council will send out notification of when public comment will be permitted. For questions for council, if you could submit them to the finance chair by close of business on the Wednesdays before committee of the whole. The finance chair will deliver those to me by noon on Friday before committee of the whole. And then the administration will address those questions over the remaining committee of the whole meetings. There's a potential for an additional public comment possibly on December 5th. Again, council will send out notification for those. We'll bring forward proposed changes prior to adoption, and then the goal will be for council to approve the appropriation ordinance by December 19th. And that wraps up my presentation.
Thank you, Director Burry.
You're welcome.
Anything from council, anything further? Yep, Mr. President?
Yes, thank you. I just want clarification. Do you expect, Mr. Finance Chair, this Wednesday to be the first submittal of questions?
If everyone has an appetite to have Finance Committee discussion on Monday, then certainly I'm willing to give it a shot. And I guess on that topic of process, I was just, obviously, we've heard that that's the administration's desire. Is council amenable to that, to submitting questions kind of through, Finance Chair? I'm certainly willing to kind of cull any duplicates, group them by topic, and then, batch them and get them to the administration by a particular deadline, so we can, or they can do the homework, and then we can have hopefully a fruitful discussion during committees. If that's the will of council, I'm certainly open to facilitating that.
I wholeheartedly support that.
Okay.
Just to put in my opinion, I think it's the most efficient way to actually run it.
Okay.
So I appreciate all the previous years that you've done it.
Sure. Any objection from city attorney on this? Again, these would be submitted by email, wouldn't be a discussion or any back and forth. It would simply be, they all come to me, I group them, pass them on to the administration.
As long as there's no discussion, that's perfectly fine.
All right. So no objection on process? All right, okay. Then I guess I will see everybody back here for Finance Committee on Monday, the 14th. All right. Have a good night, everybody.